Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we try to cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space. I'm Griff Somke.
And I'm Jay McKenzie.
Today we have a very special guest with us. Phrost is the owner and founder of Bullshido.net, which is a website that started as a way to combat fraud in the martial arts and gradually expanded its coverage area to all manner of false claims and misinformation. The site, as well as the associated podcast, are an invaluable resource in the ongoing information war we find ourselves in. If you like what you're hearing, please make sure to subscribe to the newsletter at DidNothingWrongPod.com. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. We've got a great show for you today. Thanks for joining us. Phrost, thank you for coming on the podcast, man. We are really excited to have you here.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
I've personally been a fan of Bullshido since about 2005. I discovered you guys maybe 3 to 4 months after I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it was amazing. So you guys were kind of there with me for like my whole time going through all the belts in Jiu-Jitsu. And it's really great to be talking to you because I don't think a lot of people that might be listening understand what the landscape in martial arts was like before you guys came along. That there were a lot of people out there who were making all manner of dubious claims about all manner of things. And to my knowledge, Bullshido was the first attempt by really anybody to come through and make those people put up or shut up.
Yeah.
And a lot of them just ended up shutting up because they had nothing to put up, as it were. So can you talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea to do this project?
Honestly, what happened was we were kind of hanging out. Everybody's either MMA fans or athletes or training back in the day. And this is circa like 2001, 2002. There were only a handful of forums out there for the sport because it was nowhere near what it is today. And so a lot of people that had just trained in martial arts, various ones, were hanging out on forums because that's where things were back then. They hadn't even invented the term social media. So we were,
right.
Then a lot of us were on the Abu Dhabi Combat Club forum. Cause if you remember, the Jiu-Jitsu
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. They were the big one because there was a huge movement over there. A lot of people doing Jiu-Jitsu. I think one of the actual princes was sponsoring a lot of the Gracie family to come over there and train. And so they had their own little forum. And a couple of us were hanging out on it. As the story goes, we were discussing some pretty shady stuff going on that was actually going on around a couple of the different forums, trying to, there was one athlete that was doing some shady stuff. Well, I won't get too far into it because I don't want to run into liability here.
Tale as old as time.
Oh, yeah. And that's exactly why we started the website, because people were going through and shutting down all discussion on this topic. And so we were like, you know what? We started up our own platform where people could discuss some of the like unseemly things, some of the ridiculous stuff without being concerned about being canceled or like shut down. Or we had our own platform and it was open to whoever. And we realized within a short span of time that we just couldn't have it just completely unfiltered. So instead of having an active moderating staff, our moderators would just nudge the conversation towards, okay, do you have evidence for this? What is supporting this? Do you have what proof do you have for the claims that you're making? And being in the martial arts community, when we started calling out, certain flaky, weird, weirdos and con artists and grifters and people that claim superpowers and all kinds of stuff. Because like you said, that was the landscape.
Oh, yeah.
And so we set up the system. I didn't even come up with this. It was sort of organically manifested where people would show up from the forums in person at various martial arts schools and just beat the piss out of each other. So we called those throwdowns.
Right. One of my great regrets in life is that I never actually got to do one. I'm up in Seattle, Washington, and there wasn't a whole lot of people from Seattle, maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I never actually got to go to a throwdown, which really kind of bummed me out because that sounded like such a great idea.
Yeah.
So is this people that had a beef that needed to settle it, and would come to the throwdown, or just
yes,
for the hell of it
no,
sometimes?
People that were just totally got along with each other. They'd still beat the shit. Can I curse on this podcast?
Oh, yes.
Yes, you can curse on this
Feel free.
podcast.
I feel like I'm...
Go right the fuck ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so they would just beat the shit out of each other for fun. I mean, because that's kind of the spirit of things. You know, that's the martial arts. And so there was a lot of sparring that was not without any, or that was without any malice, and there was some that was with actual, bad intentions. And we still have tons of video somewhere in the archives of those events. And it was great.
There were definitely some epic moments,
and that actually,
when it comes to throwdown,
and the people that showed up were afforded a certain level of respect. We even gave them a special identifier on the forums to show that
right.
Even if they got their ass kicked, they showed up to show what they could do. We changed a lot of minds that way. I mean, not just for head trauma. We the people that didn't show up at all, immediately you could write them off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how we sort of expanded on a lot of things, and we accidentally bumbled into the scientific method, to be honest.
Yeah, because people would show up and they would think, I've trained 20 years of white poodle kung fu. I've learned all of these various tricks from, sensei, and they would show up and they would get owned by the average jiu-jitsu blue belt in very short order.
Yeah.
And then they would kind of have to evaluate, what did I just spend all this time learning?
Yeah, or in those days, the 6-month white belt.
Mm-hmm. A lot of them, they start training something a little more real. They'd start training something that, I believe it was Matt Thornton from Straight Blast that coined the term alive.
Yeah.
When it comes to your martial arts training, i.e. somebody who's actually fully trying to stop you from doing what it is you're trying to do to them and fights back, which was really rare at the time, as crazy as that sounds. And you got a lot of people that came away with a new respect for what that meant. But then there were a lot of people who just basically stopped coming around altogether, or wouldn't come around because they knew it was going to happen in that circumstance.
So I'm guessing you had a lot of anonymous people. Was it mostly people with nicknames and, that would talk big, and you would finally have to put up or shut up with this, and a lot of people would just disappear on you?
Yeah, there were a lot of everybody had a username. I mean, that I have Phrost, and a bunch of interesting ones. But when you came in person, they're like, oh, hey, yeah, put a face to the name. And a lot of people just didn't. But, they had like 20,000 posts on the forum. So, and they'd never show up for throwdowns, but they were just sitting there trying to get their points in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yep. They would post and people would suggest it, and they would always have schedule conflicts and always have some reason why they couldn't do it.
It sounds like you got Twitter long before Twitter even existed, because it's not a lot has changed, really.
No, but I mean, it's a sort of mark of pride for me that, we had one of the few social media sites where you could actually get your ass kicked for the shit you said. So
yeah,
I think Twitter would be so much better if that was an option.
If there were some consequences.
Yeah.
Right. You just actually had to show up and put up. That would change everything.
I mean, it doesn't really apply to academic discussions or, people like bickering about, culture war stuff. But, when it comes to whether or not you can fight, it's pretty natural pairing.
Well, and it's really relevant because all these people in the martial arts world are selling the idea that they can teach you to defend yourself. They're, in some cases, selling the idea that they will make you like this fighting god. They should be able to show up and actually do some of that in front of real people.
Yeah.
And to a man, none of them could, for the most part. They would find out real quick that whatever your sensei told you was bullshit. Whatever his sensei may have told him was bullshit. And if you really wanted to be that person that you've been representing yourself as, you need to go find a jiu-jitsu school, a judo school, a boxing gym, a Kyokushin karate dojo, someplace where they actually hit each other and start training that, because there's really only one way to get there, and that's blood, sweat, and tears, really.
Yeah, there's no way around that.
So you guys ended up kind of, it seemed almost like at one point that changed, when mixed martial arts blew up after probably Griffin and Bonner, that fight.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, a lot of people started training jiu-jitsu. A lot of people started doing more MMA based stuff.
What year was that? Because for me,
right.
I've seen a Bruce Lee movie. I mean, and you guys can make as much fun of me as you want. I don't have the context here, so at least give me a year.
So the Griffin Bonner fight, Stephan Bonner, rest in peace, Forrest Griffin fight from 2005, which was the finals of the very first season of the UFC's reality show program that they called The Ultimate Fighter. What they did was they took a team of guys and they put them in qualifiers and they had them train, and they got to the end and they had the two guys who were sort of left standing after all the challenges have an actual MMA fight. And it was pretty epic. These two guys put on one of the all-time classics, and people all of a sudden caught on that, hey, this stuff is really fun. This is incredible to watch. They drew huge ratings with it afterwards. It basically saved the company. And it drew a lot of people into training more alive martial arts. So at that point, it sort of seems like the tide turned. People weren't signing up for the White Poodle Kung Fu quite as much anymore. It was a little harder to sell that stuff. And it really seemed like people sort of internalized what was going on with that. And the paradigm sort of shifted. And you guys sort of branched out from there.
Yeah,
it seemed.
We, I mean, it took a while for that to diffuse into the public sort of consciousness for more people to get in. There were a lot of clingers on that were still like, no. This is just a sport, and it's not the street because there's no broken glass and lava. You're gonna grip on the sidewalk and whatever, and all those excuses that we ran into ad nauseum back in the day. So it took another like 5 years before it started to really sink in for people, and then giant pay-per-views and events and people them selling like tap out crap at Walmart and just, all the, it became a thing in the culture. So at that point we're just like, okay, the number of people that genuinely believe this stuff, that the ridiculous stuff, is on the decline. And so the only people that are hanging on to those things and still trying to sell that, still trying to make a life, are just the ones that are really desperate and sad, to be honest. They're just really sad older men trying to squeeze out some prestige or some status from this ridiculous nonsense from even the more ridiculous people that will believe it. And so we're like, this kind of feels like beating up on, kids that are a little bit, well, okay, I'm not going to go there, but it feels like it was unfair.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, well, we've
real life adult men who are convinced they are ninjas.
Man children.
And they've spent a long time being ninjas.
Grown man children.
And they'll tell you about being ninjas at every opportunity.
With a lot of emotional issues, and the term goes, low status males. And so I mean, a lot of them incels, that kind of thing. But we realize, okay, fewer people are taking this stuff seriously. We have this giant platform. There are so many things that overlap with the area of interest that we've been covering. So let's expand. Let's start talking about health and fitness and all the ways that people are taking advantage of in that sphere, in that industry, the market. And so it kind of, this was right around the same time, and I know you're probably going to bring this up later, but Joe Rogan's whole thing was kicking off. And he was going in the opposite direction that we were going, because he was taking this platform full of, dudes that are interested in dude stuff, fighting, athletics, sports, fitness, etc. And he was just selling them supplements and talking about, some of the kookier conspiracy theories and having people on his podcast that don't believe in the germ theory of disease.
Yeah.
Yes. And he definitely built himself quite the little audience based on that. I think it's interesting that his first sort of people that I think got into his podcast, a lot of them were martial artists, jiu-jitsu people. They were, hey, he's one of us. He's definitely one of us. And some of these people got led down a path as a result of this.
It's kind of like the old Griff died and it got replaced by something bigger and much, much worse.
Yeah. Because looking at it, what Bullshido did and accomplished is really important, and it almost sort of looks now in a way like it was training to be able to take on what's out there now, because it's way worse and it's way more pervasive. We deal with this all the time. Our main focus to some extent is news and media criticism. And
there's a lot.
Wow, there is just a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago we really started to deliberately make the shift towards doing what I've been describing as teaching self-defense against bullshit. So there's so many ways in which you can be like taken advantage of nowadays because there's just so much information out there. And there's so much misinformation out there. And there's so many things you need to know as a competent adult to avoid being, I'm like, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, we had to worry about our parents, grandparents being taken in by phone scams and stuff and those sorts of things.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's so many of those things out there now that you just cannot keep up with all the ways, from television bombarding you with misinformation to, you getting on the internet or whatever, Facebook, etc., and seeing this just hot garbage just makes no sense at all, but it appeals to what you want to believe, or it validates your worldview, so you're susceptible to it. And people have no armor against that. They have no self-defense against being manipulated into acting against their own best interests. And so...
Right.
We don't talk about this in school. We need to start, but we don't.
Yes, this is definitely a conversation that should start very young for kids coming up, and explain that there are really bad people out there who want to convince you to do really bad things or to buy their products because this is how they make a living. There's nothing valid about what they're doing, but they do it, and you have to be aware of that and ready to, deal with it however you feel like you're going to deal with it. One question I got to ask, because, again, I'm a huge fan of the site. Out of all the times that somebody got busted, who would you say took it the worst?
Oh, I mean, we could take it all the way back to like 2003 when, and this is a deep cut for people that are in not in the martial arts community, but in the 80s, there was this highly popular ninja master that sold books on all these things called like Ninja Secrets of Invisibility and even some weirder stuff. And went by the name of Ashita Kim. And so I love this story because it's so bananas. I can't tell this story to normies because they'll look at me like, are you on drugs? Anyway, so he had for the longest time in the earlier days of the internet this $10,000 challenge where if you put up $10,000, he would fight you and display his amazing ninja abilities. But I mean, who's got $10,000 sitting around? Well, one of our members did, and he piled it on his desk and be like, "Let's do this." And so, cue the excuses and the hedging and the hymns and the halls, blah, 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 blah. And so it escalated, and I'm going to cut to the chase here. It escalated all the way to the point where the guy's, because he was semi-notable, the guy's Wikipedia article became the point of contention. And short version of it, the founder of Wikipedia, Jim Wales himself, deleted the dude's article because the guy had lost his shit, tracked down his red Hyundai and was posting his license plate or something on the internet. And he was like, you know what? Fuck this. Fuck you. I'm going back to the Wikimedia Foundation. I'm like, and then the guy, Ashita Kim, whose real name was Radford Davis, he lived in a trailer because we had a PI track him down and, root through his trash to confirm, threatened to go up to him. And because we, Bullshido, and Jim Wales and the Wikimedia Foundation were all together in a rival ninja clan.
Oh.
And that's just not something you could tell people. But it's something you want to tell people because holy shit,
It is wild because, there were so many people who, when they got called out, would come in and threaten and bluster. And part of the reason Bullshido got away with it as much as I think they did was because there were lawyers involved.
Oh, we had some.
And they would come in and say, oh, yeah, you want to do that? We'll provide this, 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 and this. And that shut a lot of people up.
Strangely, a lot of attorneys do martial arts too. So, we had a huge group of like a cadre of people like, yeah, I'll volunteer my time. Oh, just whatever, let's fuck those guys. So legally. And, so Sam Browning was our rock. He's still around out there. I think he does like real estate law in Connecticut. I mean, just that dude, don't sick him on somebody or they're done. But yeah, so we had tons of people that would go after those things from that perspective. In fact, Sam contributed to getting somebody put in federal prison for misrepresenting himself as an Interpol agent and giving expert testimony in court.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's what that world was like at the time, because no one was checking and no one was calling these people on any of it.
Yeah, nobody thought there would be consequences on the internet. It's
Nope.
why, lie. Who cares? What's going to happen? What are you going to do about it? I'm just some guy in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to find me.
No one's ever going to know if I tell everybody I was a SEAL. They're never going to have any idea. But then all of a sudden this forum full of lawyers and smart-ass martial artists shows up and says, no, you're going to have to actually do something about that. And God, that was fun. Watching those people just all of a sudden get the facts of reality for the very first time in their lives, I think in some cases, just wow.
Yeah, we were the find out to their fuck around.
Absolutely. Before that phrase was ubiquitous, it was definitely something that would have described Bullshido very, very well. One thing that's kind of interesting in the last few years is that it seems like this work has kind of gotten political, whether you like that or not. There definitely is a political component to all of this that wasn't always there, but it certainly is now. Did you ever see that coming?
I didn't see it coming. I saw it as a problem because, like, take the anti-vax movement for example, which we brushed up against every now and then. And when we first started, like the first decade of our organization, when we talk about it, it was mainly a factor of the left. The left,
right.
The people that have like spirit catchers and dream catchers in their
the hippies,
the crystal monger, whatever, those people. Yeah, and so they were the ones that were going to vaccinate their indigo children, and then at some point that just completely shifted, and it was wild. And so right around the same time, I mean, we're just kind of Forrest Gumping our way into this stuff. Right around the same time, we were expanding our horizons. The 2015 run up to the 2016 election happened, and we were doing everything we could to navigate, to thread that needle, to just not be overtly political on stuff. But and even to this day, it's extremely difficult because it seems like one side of that divide has absolutely embraced misinformation and like bullshit as tactics in their quest for political power. And it's hard. It's hard not to say, yeah, basically everything you say is bullshit, because it's, that's what you do. That's how you're getting people to believe and vote for you. So it's still a challenge to try and to thread that.
I know you posted recently on Twitter saying that I don't know if you said you are a libertarian, or at least it used to identify as one. And I wasn't sure, because I read your tweets and I go through them and I think, well, this guy kind of sounds like a liberal, but I also kind of knew you weren't a liberal. But then I'm thinking about it and it's like, well, he's really just telling the truth, and there's only kind of one side that generally has these accepted facts when it comes to vaccines and some of these popular political topics. So, yeah, I don't know if you have a label or if you just try to avoid it.
I don't really line up neatly anywhere, because for the longest time I did describe myself as a libertarian, and in a perfect world I would still be a libertarian, but we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where houses burn down and you need the fire department. And, if there were private roads, there'd be a toll booth every 50 feet. Libertarianism is a great ideal to strive towards, where everyone in society is responsible for their own, interest and thing, and nobody's trying to take advantage of that to squeeze out a little more. But it just doesn't line up with, the way that we're wired to behave. So it's incompatible with human nature.
And unfortunately, we have Rand Paul and Ron Paul, and that's what most people think of as libertarian now. So that probably poisoned the well a little bit. And that's not at all what I think about with you. You're talking about an actual libertarian, not an internet cosplaying libertarian.
Not Glenn Beck, who uses that label just so you're like, oh yeah, you're just not another Republican shill. Yeah, or who's the dork with the beanie? Oh, Tim Pool. Yeah, that.
Not a right-winger, Tim Pool.
Yeah, no.
Not a Trump supporter.
No.
I'm totally a liberal. Look at me liberaling liberally. And, motherfucker, shut up. Everything you say is straight right-wing, alt-right crap.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they say classical liberal at this point, and I think at some point that essentially means monarchist.
Oh, yeah, that's a troll. That's a full-on troll, and they know it.
Yeah, they don't even get that. Thomas Jefferson was a classical liberal, and and Thomas Jefferson would have those guys horsewhipped.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't really line up anywhere because it's always changing. Everything's changing. The discourse is changing. The evidence, the society's changing. You have to kind of stay fluid. And the minute you allow somebody to fix a label on you, they use that label to dismiss what you're saying. And, you know, if you can be the guy in the room that says, no, I'm not on board with all this stuff because, you know, I don't need to belong to your group. I just need to belong to the correct side of history. And a lot of people aren't like that. They need to belong. They need to feel like there's other people around them that validate their views. And so they'll tweak their views to be validated. And I'm like, you just got to start on the inside. You know, you just got to, it's a matter of priority. And I talk a lot about virtue, like the old school virtue, you know, the Nicomachean ethics and that sort of thing. Where it comes from inside has to be a priority for you to be aligned with. I don't even use the word truth anymore because that word's been poisoned. The facts.
Mm-hmm.
To wanting to know your decisions are based on your best effort to understand objective reality.
And I have so much respect for that and for what you're doing with your site. But I think about it and I feel for you, and it's like it's the same struggle that we go through, because if you would just pick a side, if you would just say, I'm over here, I'm on this team, you'd probably be making millions now. You'd have a private island somewhere.
God.
You'd
have a warehouse in Romania at least.
That's right. Because a lot of times it is that easy. It is just pick a side. You defend the people on your side. You say that this is the truth and the only truth, and then eventually you blow up.
Yeah, no, I realize that every day when, you know, I'm like, hey, can we get maybe a Patreon subscriber or two?
I know.
And meanwhile, I go to my real boy, big boy job and come and do this in my spare time and, trying to herd all the damn cats to help out on the stuff that, our audience and be like, hey, man, I need some help here. Like, oh, yeah, okay. Because we all have real jobs. We finally got the nonprofit organization set up for this effort so that at least people's contributions can be tax deductible. But I am personally terrible about fundraising. So I'm like, I don't want to deal with money. Fuck money. I just want to do the right thing.
I know. We've had such a hard time being like, okay, we have to ask people to subscribe and to help us and to be a part of it. And it's, I don't want to do it, but you have to do it. But it's a struggle, and it doesn't pay to try to find a sinner. And sometimes I almost feel a little guilty when my tweets or posts go viral, because I think, oh, did this go viral for the right reasons or the wrong ones?
Oh, yeah.
But if you're always living in that sort of mindset, it means, well, you're not always blowing up. You're not getting all the donations. Everyone isn't flocking to you. And sometimes you give people the real, actual truth. It's not the narrative they want to hear.
No.
And then they're turned off by you.
Easiest way to turn off somebody is to make them just slightly uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so many of the people that are making a huge living doing this, they know who their audience is now, and they aren't going to make that audience uncomfortable. They're going to play to that audience and play it very, very, very safe. They're not going to take on topics that might piss these people off or make them think a little harder. Nope, just keep it going.
Yeah, if anything, they just won't talk about it. They're not going to try to challenge it or question it. It's just you do a search on that one, on China, on Russia, on vaccines, whatever the thing is, they just don't mention it because they know they can't.
Yeah, no, there's I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. I kind of hope you're not, but, James Lindsay a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
We know.
Okay, perfect.
We know him.
Jimmy Concept.
Yeah, I have a standing challenge to fight that guy.
I would pay to see that. Him and his kung fu.
I've been trying to get him to fight me, but he blocked me off Twitter, and even though he's back now, I'm still blocked. I don't know if that resets or what.
Did he?
But, he describes himself as a martial artist, and he even has.
He does. We
dug up a old blog post of his on the way. It was like becomingthelion.blogspot.com or something like that, right? And he's got this long rant about how you shouldn't have to spar to be good at martial arts, and unlike those amateurs over at Bullshido who blah 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 blah.
Oh.
So we have history.
Shots fired.
And this was before he was trying to be taken seriously as one of the new atheists, glomming onto that movement. And then when that didn't work, he did that whole trying to be the next so-call and do that hoax. And then that didn't, he got a little bit of prominence with that. But then he from there, he got retweeted by Trump and just went full on alt-right,
Yep.
shitlord.
Mhm.
And that's a perfect case study in audience capture. It's somebody that does not have their own sort of moral compass, that there's no virtue, there's no personal integrity of who you are. You just want status. You just want to be identified as I want to be somebody, and so that's how those people become that, because, whatever, you don't have any internal consistency. So I'll just say whatever,
You've got a lot of failed actors out there that end up being influencers or these big media figures that they just treat it like a role. It's something they get paid to do, and maybe they don't get a salary off of it, but they know that, hey, if you say this enough times with this group of people, you're going to make money. And so they just find that thing, and eventually it sticks. We've seen that with somebody we've talked about before, with Candace Owens.
Right.
Tried to be kind of a lefty and had a couple, she had a blog-ish news site that she tried to do, and then she had some sort of doxing site that she said was going to be doxing for good, that she's going to reveal these people who are hiding in anonymity online, and then that didn't work out. And then she kind of disappeared for a while, and she showed up on InfoWars. And then she's this big right-wing MAGA person who got red-pilled and is over there talking to Cernovich and Paul Joseph Watson and Jack Posobiec. And, oh, thank you for red-pilling me. I now see the light. Gamergate was an epiphany. And thank you so much. And then she starts with AstroTurf Blexit, which is black people leaving the Democratic Party. And it's all very transparent, but I don't know. Last time I looked, she's got, 3 million?
Yeah, close to 3 million followers. She's huge platform now.
Yeah.
She's
more important to have a seat at the table, even if the table is in the freaking landfill.
Yeah. And it pays better than Game of Thrones blogging. You could do that, or you could just repeat any level of fake news, make up stories, and, hey, they got a basement in this pizza parlor, I promise. Go shoot it up. Free the kids.
So did James Lindsay go on Rogan and then get retweeted by Trump, or was the retweet first and then Rogan? Do you remember?
If I remember correctly, Lindsay had been on there to discuss their whole grievance studies, so-called grievance studies, study with Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose. And,
right.
And at the time I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'll pay attention to it, but they're definitely cherry picking this crap. So it's not the exact, it's not the best thing. It's not academic quality.
And he sent in that was when he sent in the scientific papers.
Yeah,
is
he
that
sent
right?
in a bunch of
And
scientific papers. I mean, they just shotgun blasted them out and saw where they landed. The dog park paper about queer performativity in dog parks or something like that. Yeah, okay, whatever. I mean,
just see what they could get published and kind of make the left look foolish and silly. And it was the initial stuff into wokeism, and then he went like full on grifter, anti-woke.
My encounter with him, because I don't know how it popped up into my feed, but Elliot Page had posted a picture, swimsuit going, summertime, something or other, right? And somebody had replied to Elliot saying, "Oh, you look badass." And then I don't know, that upset Jimmy, that triggered him. He's like, "Badass? I could kill you with a single punch at like 10% of my power." That was what I replied to. And then me, who fucking hates bullies. Oh, no.
Uh-huh.
No, son, not in my vicinity. So I went after him. Was like, "Hey, buddy, you're a tough guy, right? I'll spar with you. You can even use 100% of your power." And so caught his attention with that, and he sent all his stupid little trollings after me, which, I've been doing this shit for a lot longer. That's not going to work on me. I mean, I invented that shit. So so it was hilarious, and he eventually blocked me. And so ever since, I've been trying to get that guy to fight me for real. It's like, fight me IRL, buddy. I'm serious.
Jimmy Concepts, if you're listening, fight Phrost, you coward. Seriously.
That is kind of their first go-to, is they've got this big following on Twitter, and then they're going to intimidate you and scare you. And for most people, that works, and they can get people to either lock up their account or delete it, disappear. Most people just don't want to deal with that. But then when you don't turtle up and you actually just kind of sit there and take it, sometimes they just don't know what to do. They just kind of look around like, wait, he's not done. He's not scared of me. And yeah, because they have all these trolls and these people that will, some of them are real, some of them may be bots, but you get kind of troll swarmed. And most people, I think for the first time when that hits them, kind of freak out a little bit because it's scary and you don't know what's going to happen or what these people are going to do or look for or find. But then I think we're all kind of veterans of it to an extent, and we just kind of don't care. And at a certain point, they just look around like, wait, do I block them? Do I ignore them? Do I keep arguing with them? What am I supposed to do? Like, and you often, I sometimes wonder if they've got like a DM group going and they talk amongst themselves like, hey, what's the plan? What do we do now?
Yeah, they probably have a Discord channel or something out there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they've got an ignore list too. Just a do not engage.
You're on the list. And now you're on the list, man.
Absolutely.
It's great. But I mean, it's the weirdos like us that are like, this is fun. This is a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon. Like, come on. What are you going to say that's going to hurt my feelings, dude? You know, I can set my phone down and walk away, you know?
Exactly. Like, I'm going to go train now. You guys can have this conversation and I'll read your 100 freaking messages when I come back. I'm going to go roll for an hour because that sounds like a way more productive use of my time than reading anything you've got to say.
Yeah. We've heard every insult you've got. So yeah, fire away.
Yeah, and I've actually apologized for him being a thing because it's clear that when he started doing his shit posting routine, I saw so many of that, those little things that he would do reflected in a lot of the ways that we used to post on Bullshito. A lot of the, just snarky, I don't take this seriously, so I'm going to reply with this, just the most ridiculous. I mean, come on, dude.
Yep.
It's like, that was cool in like 97. So,
well, and sometimes you just think he blew up partly because he just kept posting. So many of these guys, I don't even know that they had a shtick or a plan. They just, every day, they just get up and they just post and post and post and post, and they just don't stop. And eventually people see it and think, oh yeah, that guy's saying what I want to hear, or that's someone I want to amplify. And sometimes it really is that simple. You think, well, how did this person become a thing? And it's like, they just didn't log off.
Yeah.
They just kept going.
Art is simply committing to the bit in some cases and just being really committed to the bit. And that's what these guys do.
And then on a more insidious level, the algorithm rewards engagement. And so if you're out there, you're saying this, reprehensible shit, and people that are rightly, attacking you for that, the algorithm doesn't see, the morality of it. It sees the engagement. And so they're like, oh, this is a person that gets a lot of engagement, so let's keep them. They're out there sharecropping for us with their content, and we're raking in the tens of dollars in whatever Twitter Blue subscriptions now, I guess.
Yeah, well, it was like with Trump. So many of the people that were amplifying him the most were fact checking him. They were pointing out how wrong he was and how incorrect and what the real truth was. But at the end of the day, it just made his post get bigger and blow up more. And that's why when people say he wouldn't have been president without Twitter, it's like, well, yeah, because of the algorithm, because people thought they were helping and they were doing the opposite.
Yeah, and the big news channels were like, oh my God, this guy is great for ratings. I mean, what horrible thing did he made fun of a handicapped guy today? Awesome, man. Is he talking about, like walking in on teenagers, getting naked in the dressing room? Oh man, we're going to sell so many boxes of soap.
And you realize just how intertwined with the pro wrestling business Trump has always been. You understand that, man, there's a reason why he's doing all of this stuff. He learned it from the best in that business, and he's working you guys, all of you.
I wish I could think it was just a heel sort of thing, and we could all maintain, what's the term, kayfabe, or I don't know how you pronounce that. But
kayfabe, yes.
And then just go home and not have to vote for this guy. I was like, man, if you want to be a influencer and play Twitter, fine. But, just stay out of government.
Yeah. The best thing about Biden for me is that I can go days and sometimes weeks without thinking about him. Without
That's so true.
having to worry about him. Just he's doing his job somewhere. And if he's not, somebody else is doing it for him. And that's fine. That's fine. There's no tweets at 2 a.m. that are going to set the world on fire. Okay. Great.
What a concept. So let's talk a little bit about a guy who's been in the news recently, talking about virtue, talking about the idea of like, why are you doing certain things that you're doing? Andrew Tate. For those of you guys who don't know, Andrew Tate is an MRA, men's rights activist, kind of a hardcore misogynist grifter who had a kickboxing career to some extent. And now he's parlayed that into the idea of being the ultimate alpha male. He's been on Big Brother in the UK, steadily increased his exposure online in the last few years. He sells young men, even like preteen kids, on the idea of breaking out of the matrix and taking control of their lives for only $29.95 a month that you can pay him. And he and his brother got arrested for rape and human trafficking in Romania, but there's a lot of people that don't seem to care at all about this. They're still supporting him, still making excuses for him. Is this a story you've been following and kind of paying attention to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Tate popped up on our radar a couple years ago. We haven't done anything specific about him, but more broadly, just he is a product of a weird and uncomfortable relationship dudes have with talking about their own masculinity and their need to express it and to be validated for it. And so we've kind of just not wanted to, I've been a little bit careful about not amplifying the guy by, mentioning his name so much as just trying to get at the root causes of the issue. And it's not an easy one to talk about because like every dude wants to be taken seriously as a dude, but like the average guy just out there going around being a guy, especially the young guys, have to sort out a lot of shit just to find a place for themselves in the world that we live in today. And so it's a mess. And then you have that guy out there, he's just another friggin' carnival barker out there, selling snake oil of some form and just happens to be emotional. And there's people that'll buy into it. It's like, man, honestly, I chalk a lot of it up to there's a lack of fatherhood. There's a crisis of a lack of good, real male role models like TV dad. Anytime you talk about, oh, hey, who's a good male role model? Half the people are going to bring up a TV or movie character because there really aren't that many good people to point at.
Yeah. And when you see what these kids growing up with a lack of, positive male influence in their life, maybe, they don't even have male teachers in a lot of cases. They go to the age of puberty without necessarily seeing a guy as an authority figure. Dad cut out early. You have mostly women in their life. And when you hit that wall of puberty and you're trying to figure out, what does this actually do? What do I actually do here? And you're on YouTube far too much, as kids are these days.
There's another algorithm.
Get off my lawn. And you run into your guys like Andrew Tate because the algorithm rewards that. And these are your fathers to some extent. These are your influences. And that to me is just the really awful part of all of this, is that kids as young as 12 and guys like Andrew Anglin from the Daily Stormer have been explicit saying, we write our website for 11-year-olds. And we want to make sure that we can program these kids as early as possible before they're really old enough to ask the hard questions. And that's a problem. Going forward, this is a huge one.
Well, and I really sympathize with you trying to talk about this issue without talking about him, because I was reading an article in BuzzFeed, actually, that kind of covered this and was looking at his subscriptions and people can go to his site and sign up for these programs, and they've kind of changed over the years, but they were just listing the numbers, and they said his Hustlers University 2.0 had 12,000 subscribers in March, but then he got kicked off of TikTok and YouTube and Facebook, and he started getting deplatformed. And they love it in a sense when this happens, because you have that initial burst of, oh, you've been canceled, oh, the Matrix, the deep state, the whatever you call it, has come after me. Well, his subscribers on his site went from 12,000 to 77,000 to 129,000 by August. And at one point, let's see, by October of last year, he had 221,000 users in his Discord server. And he was charging $49.99 a month to be there. And you can't say for sure if that's real, but you can glean a lot there, because in August he did this Tucker interview, and that blew up. And there's this site called SimilarWeb, which shows you statistics for websites. And I was looking at it, and his site traffic in August, there were 2.2 million people going to his site. By October of last year, it's at 5.8 million. So it's, how do you beat it? How do you stop it?
Well, I mean, from the strategy that we're adopting, and I think a lot of people have concluded that it's a good one, is to just, there's always going to be someone like him. There's always going to be somebody that looks for vulnerable people to exploit for their own benefit and to the detriment of those people that are being exploited, of course. And so you have to build up the self-defense against that shit. You gotta, and you gotta start early, and our education system's probably not going to do it. There's too many people trying to get their 2 cents in and to muddy the waters and, yell at school boards. And
that's all political now too, right?
It's all political because that's where the minds are. So you got to go in there and, keep the young minds from learning things like critical thinking. I mean, because in a healthy society, we would have, you start teaching this at a young age. So it's got to start at home. And you got to get people that are concerned about the issue, and you got to start bringing it up as a topic to discuss with your kids. You don't have kids, then maybe make some people uncomfortable with the family reunion, and you got to flood the information space with as much positive resources and not corny positive. Because I know there's a lot of people out there that are doing good work, and I don't want to name anyone specifically because I don't want them to feel bad about it. But if it comes off as too teachery, too institutional, too like, normie friendly shit, kids, especially young dudes, are not going to gravitate towards that. They want the edgy shit. They want the stuff that's going to drop an F-bomb. They want the stuff that's going to make them feel like, yeah, fuck, yeah, this is cool, and these people aren't like stiffs, and I'm cool by being associated with them. So you have to go at it at a different angle, and a lot of people don't. And it's the same reason that public health communications have such a hard time penetrating to the normal person out there on the street, because it just sounds so condescending, smug, institutional, and sterilized. So on both of those things, there need to be more people in the discussion, in the discourse, that are going at it from a level of, I'm going to reach out to my audience and I'm going to talk to them like they need to hear it in a way that they're going to respect. And in order to do that, you got to say, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to try and impress anybody with how erudite my speech is and how flowery language, and, I'm going to write this beautiful abstract to my article. No, you're going to drop the fucking word motherfucker in a piece here and there, and you're going to use memes, and you're going to relate to them on stuff. Do a stupid ass TikTok dance. Who gives a shit? As long as it reduces the amount of idiots in the world.
It's a challenge, really, getting kids, especially at that age, that are really looking for that edgy sort of, I don't want to be like my parents, I want to see whatever the new thing's going to be, to turn it in a direction that is not to some awful grifter. Especially now with, YouTube being what it is, you have to constantly sit on top of that and be like, okay, what are you watching? What are you watching? Who is this person? Who is this? What are they saying? Let's have a talk about this. This is not something you need to see at this age.
Yeah.
It's really challenging
it's hard
to try and police that.
And even as a parent, you've got two parents are working these days just to make ends meet. Everything's expensive as shit. So you're exhausted coming from the day, from work, and you spend time with your kids, and you got to mentor and develop them into being, not just crap. And you got to be on top of that. And we're running ragged as a culture, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel for a long time. So the only thing we can do is get the people that have the luxury of the free time. They have use the word privilege to spend their time doing this stuff. They have a little bit more money to spend on, running a podcast or reaching out to people or making their own video content out there to counteract all the other stuff, because it's still going to be outnumbered by that because the money is on the other end of the thing. But, you can save a few.
Right.
Well, and this straight talk, this kind of centering people is also just boring. And guys like Andrew Tate make life seem so exciting, and he's not just selling you a subscription, it's a lifestyle, and it's taking control. And you watch these videos, and you can absolutely see how it's intoxicating. All of these guys do it, and Alex Jones does it, where they think the red pill is this secret formula. You've cracked the code. You understand life in ways that other people don't, and especially when you're 13. That's, oh yeah, the world doesn't make sense. The world is a mess. Why do people do the things that they do? And it's not hard to see why this is popular and why it can blow up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is always an uphill battle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think that there's any easy solution to it. You just got to put in the effort, because the people on the other side are always going to put in the effort, and they usually have more resources, and they're more motivated. And it's not like it's a battle that can be won, and you have to look at it from that perspective, is that you can just do better. You can pull a few people out of it. You're not gonna solve the problems of the world, but you're gonna reduce the amount of bullshit and suffering that results from said bullshit. Just by doing it a little bit, and the more people that get involved, the less of that there is.
You got to start early too, because once they're in it, once they bought it,
it's a lot harder to pull them out.
I have a son. I have a toddler son. He just turned 4 not too long ago, and so I am already. I'm doing double duty. Everything that I do here, I also try to figure out a way to apply to him. I mean, he watches Paw Patrol once in a while. Okay, it's like, okay, yeah, you're fine, but I have to actively
right there with you
and make sure that he's not seeing me displaying any behaviors I don't want him to emulate when he gets older. So it's hard.
Well, and sometimes the parent manuals, I'm sure you've read them. I've read them, and sometimes it's all best case scenario. It's all you never lose your temper. You never
good luck.
have a bad day, and like there's a difference between hitting your kid, which is wrong and never okay and never acceptable, but there's a difference between that and raising your tone too much, yelling too loudly, losing your temper too quickly. But sometimes the guides out there make it seem like, well, you can always just talk in a calm and rational manner. And sometimes like you got to get out the door. They got to go to school. You got to go to work. You got things going on. You're human. You're going to make mistakes. And I don't know, for me, it's, I want my kids to listen to me, but also know that I make mistakes, and I want to be like honest with them and even apologize to them. Tell them, hey, I screwed up and I'm going to try to do better, because we're all always trying to do better. That's my goal in life. That's
right.
Pretending like we're perfect, like we've got it all figured out. That's just silly.
Because nobody does, no matter what. And you don't want to raise the kind of kid that won't apologize when they make a mistake. You have to model that behavior of like, we're all going to screw up sometimes.
Yep.
We're all going to make those mistakes. We're all going to raise our tone when we shouldn't. We're all going to get frustrated. We're all going to get mad at people sometimes. How do you handle that correctly? How do you handle that appropriately? And when you can't, what do you do to make up for that? How do you make up for actions that you might have not done the thing that you wanted to do in that situation?
I think even people that think, oh, my son is already in Andrew Tate or whoever the next guy is going to be, and in that world, it is a lot harder to pull somebody out who's already in this. But I also think the number one thing, if you want to fix it and make it better, is just show up.
Right.
I mean, really just be in the room, just be there for them. Sometimes it's that easy, or at least that's the starting point. And I know for some people who work 2 jobs, single parent, some of that, even that's impossible, but you got to try, you got to be there. And yeah, it's not like we're going to fix it and save everyone, but man, it'd be nice if we could save some.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect is the enemy of the good. So don't fixate on trying to do it all. Just do something.
And this is where I think that, like, you know, kind of to bring it back a little bit, getting your kids involved in some kind of combat sport, for lack of a better word, can definitely teach them a whole lot about resilience, about how do you come back from a bad day? How do you come back from a physical ass kicking in some cases? What do you do?
Yeah.
You're not always going to have a great day. Sometimes the bear's just going to eat you.
Yeah. And you learn humility from just, you know, because in jiu-jitsu, whatever, you just get dominated sometimes. There's always just that one guy who, no matter how much you train, how strong you are, whatever, just better. And that's life. You're not ever going to be the top of pretty much anything. There's always going to be somebody that's better. You got to learn how to deal with failure. And a lot of people don't. They see all these success stories and they see the Instagram stories and they see the social media crap, and they only see the highlights of those people's lives. They don't see the failures because, you know, anybody with half a brain doesn't share, you know, it's like, oh crap, I fell down the stairs today like a dumbass. Most people don't do that. They don't show the lowlights. So you're comparing yourself against their highlights, and kids grow up thinking like that. And they're like, well, what the hell is wrong with me? So somebody like Andrew Tate swoops in. He's, you know, to a 14-year-old boy, he's like, oh man, this dude is exactly what I want to be when, however the hell old he is. You know, I want 30 cars and I want to yell at a teenage environmental activist.
Wow.
And he's just, some of that stuff is so cringe. He just,
I have 33 cars. Send me your email address so I can send you a list of their emissions. You earned that small dick energy reply, pal.
No, that was
anybody who brags about the amount of cars they have. I mean, Isn't that the rule?
Yeah.
Seriously, hasn't that always been the rule?
That was just such a great clapback. I can't, man, I'm grateful for Greta. She puts up with a lot of shit just because she's female and young, and she's on the opposite side of anybody that's okay with either of those two things.
Yeah, well, the very online right a couple of years ago were really going after her and comparing her to Hitler, and it was a thing that they were doing for a few weeks there because she had the gall to speak up. So they've been mad at her for a while, but yeah, she's just hanging out, and that was really an epic comeback.
Pretty much was. And it was very appropriate because, I mean, we all know what we think when we hear guys bragging about their cars. We all know what we think. We all know what that means. Come on. She just said it out loud.
And I think that is a valid approach to dealing with stuff like that. I mean, shame motivates people. Shame changes behavior. You'll find a couple academics like, no, shame never changes. Dude, no. There's a reason we are a little bit uncomfortable if we realize our fly's down in public, or you got something hanging from your nose.
Yeah.
Shame changes behavior. That's the reason why 5-year-old kid is embarrassed because he wets his pants at school, because shame changes your behavior. And so we need to, I mean, in as much of a compassionate way as possible, make sure that there are hard limits on what is acceptable behavior in our culture. And misogyny and just like treating women like that, like Andrew Tate and that kind of shit, needs to be on the other side of those limits. And when they cross those lines, there is shame applied to those people to such a degree that they can't get prestige and status off of demonstrating that behavior. It harms them. It harms their credibility. People are like, oh, I don't want to associate with you. You're trash, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's the problem we run into and see, and I even saw some of this with Greta, is people said, well, she, even by replying to him, even by saying this, she's amplifying him. She's growing his brand. This is exactly what he wanted. He even retweeted someone that said that. And I don't believe that. But I think people think they're often shaming these guys when they're really not shaming them. And they're really saying things like calling him a misogynist does not hurt him, does not hurt his feelings, does not cause a problem. Some people may think that that's shaming him, but he's fine with that. With Greta's reply, sometimes it's just so good. It's so devastating that it does cut through that image that he's worked so hard to cultivate. And that is one of those where, yeah, you nailed it. And that does work, but it is like this constant kind of balancing act of how do you know, or how can you tell? And if this really blows up, I'm helping, but if it doesn't, then I'm hurting. And that's literacy. That's something that maybe we can teach one day, but it's also kind of like a feeling. Are you good on the internet? Do you understand how this works or not? And I think we're all kind of trying to navigate that and how that, see how that plays out. But I guess I did want to ask you too, kind of in that vein, how do you reach young men or just men in general who Andrew Tate is appealing because he's macho, he's alpha male, he's all this, and it's not real. But some of the woke stuff that he criticizes is performative and does go too far and isn't helpful and is really just kind of fodder for him to say, aha, see, I told you all these things are correct. How do you find the middle ground there? Because I know you try to. Do you feel like you've gotten closer to that?
I think it really does go back to virtues, to having a genuine sense of virtue. And the one in this case that would address a lot of those concerns is authenticity. If you're living authentically, if you're living values that matter, and you're being true to what you're trying to do, performativity is cringe. It's embarrassing, because then you're the people that can recognize performativity versus authenticity, you're just like, ooh, man. And, a good example of that is, at the risk of, angering people even more, is Lex Friedman, who he's performatively intelligent, and his credentials notwithstanding, his participation in the public space is just absolute cringe to anyone that realizes what he's really doing and how it's just self-aggrandizing behavior. And he's just trying to get people to take him more seriously as intelligent. And if you can identify the difference between performativity and authenticity, then you're like, what, dude, it's bad. And you feel bad for the guy, honestly. But most people can't, because they've never paid attention enough to do that for whatever reason, or they haven't developed the set of skills to distinguish between the two. So if you can teach people to understand when a behavior is performative or authentic, then that'll eliminate a lot of the horse shit that we have to deal with on social.
Yeah.
Very much. Very much.
Part of the problem there is to be able to identify it, you have to kind of be immersed in it. You have to watch it or listen to it a lot. And then unfortunately, even if you're hate listening or you're just, oh, I'm just curious, that's how they get people in. That's how they convince some of them. So it's all kind of fraught with peril, but I agree. You have to recognize it. Sometimes people just think they do. Oftentimes people think they do. They've cracked the code and they haven't. And so the struggle goes on, and it's why we keep talking every week, I guess.
Yeah. It helps to keep in mind that we are still on the very young end of the spectrum when it comes to how the human race is interacting with each other. Now, we live in the future where we can have these conversations across God knows how many miles and discuss all these things real time, 24 hours a day, with all these different ideas floating around, all this misinformation, information, good ideas, bad ideas. And we're still figuring out a tool set to navigate that without, being somebody's useful, idiot or, being a victim or making ourselves a victim. So cooperation like this and coming together and discussing stuff like this is going to be a huge, huge boon to navigating this going forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Definitely. So where do you see the future going in terms of, like you said, putting together the tool set that we would need to navigate this particular new reality? How do we do better, do you think? What are some concrete things that you think we could really work on?
So we can take it back to the classics. We can look at, like I said, a mix. You can pick and choose a lot of the approaches to dealing with a complicated world. I'm a big fan of stoicism in the classical sense, not in the, I just refuse to have emotions, which is not how that's supposed to work. It's just about keeping them in the proper context and not letting them determine your behavior or choices more than they should, because we are all emotional people. I look at a lot of the way people think in sort of a computational model. And if you look at it from that perspective, we have our emotions that work as like the base layer. Any nerd that knows computers and stuff, there's DOS. And then on top of DOS, it's Windows. And Windows is where a lot more higher executive functions where you're thinking about stuff happen. But a lot of the stuff happens behind the scenes before you even are conscious of it. And those are our emotions. And so if you kind of get in touch with why you feel the way you feel, how you think the way you think, if you understand that, and you can figure out a way to explain that to people in like a model like I just did, then it's easier to kind of control those things in the heat of the moment or the situation. It's like, yeah, I'm angry. But wait, why am I angry? I can't even, I don't know. I mean, am I going to punch this guy? Well, why do I want to punch this guy? Is he really a threat? No, he just kind of threatened my pride. Well, why am I worried about my pride? Oh, because maybe if the tribe doesn't see me as, somebody of worth, then they're going to exile me. Oh, shit. Wait, I don't live on the African savannah. What the fuck? I'm driving away.
Yeah. It's like now we're getting somewhere. We've drilled down into why you're actually doing this thing, this, herd behavior that you're doing. And it's, endemic, I think, a lot of the time in martial arts too. You see people that think that you somehow need a self-defense technique for somebody who's over there talking shit. No, you don't. Your self-defense technique is to walk away.
Yeah.
It's real easy. That is not a threat.
Yeah.
It's a threat to your pride. It's a threat to your ego. Sure. Absolutely it is. But you're not in any real danger here. Just get in your car, buddy.
Yeah, you're not getting exiled from the city you live in. You're not going to be never able to sire children or replicate your freaking genes into the next generation, or all these things that we are hardwired to worry about on a level that exists below our actual conscious thought processes. We're still animals, man, and a lot of people don't understand that. And if you can understand that, it's like, I have all these impulses. And the more you act on those without thinking, the worse your life is going to be. And there's a lot of people out there that want you to act on those. Act on your fear. Act on, they're coming for my job. Who's coming for my job? What, my job? And that's how they get you to vote against your own interests. They're like, there's so many little hooks that you have, so many glitches in your programming that can be exploited. You got to be aware of them. So in order to do that, to make people aware of it, you sometimes have to adopt the language of that jackass Andrew Tate and say things, oh, well, the Matrix, they've got you. And you've got to kind of frame it in terms that they understand using pop culture references. You got to, use the tools of your enemy against them. It's because the real world is complicated. It's infinitely complicated. The situation, human psychology is infinitely complicated. And to explain anything complicated to somebody, you have to simplify it to a point where it's almost inaccurate. And to get the point across to somebody that hasn't spent, that didn't even go get an associate's in psychology or something like that, or at least read a couple bits of the literature. You can't just let that go by and say, oh, yeah, well, you can't, I guess you can't understand this abstract, then you're not going to, you're screwed, buddy. No, people that are conscientious need to make an effort to communicate things to those people to give them a little bit of resilience against that bullshit.
Definitely. So last question, that's kind of a wrap up. What do you have in the way of future plans, personally for the site going forward? What do you see yourself doing in 2023 and on beyond?
We are, we've got the podcast, but that's mostly just us having conversations with interesting people. It's not even a big project. We might get one episode out a month. So, what I see us doing a lot more in the coming year is like video content and trying to reach out to people because, oh God, TikTok, it's such, for example, or just the stories, the vertical videos that are on every platform. Everybody's trying to be what Vine was like 10 years ago.
Right.
Those are flooded with so much misinformation now that even the old school bullshito that we thought we had gotten rid of like decades ago is popping back up. A guy's like, oh, you can disarm anybody with a handgun using this tech. No, dude, you're going to end up with, a split cranium. And it's resurging. And so we're like, oh, crap, we got to do this again. So we need to start throwing out that stuff out there so that it's at least showing up in people's feeds here and there. Like, oh, wait, the video I just watched was absolute horseshit because there's these people that were doing this before any of it was cool. And so we're going to be doing a lot more video content. We're converting a lot of our old essays on the topic of self-defense against bullshit into like video essays. So one we just finished last night was it's sort of a test case from the article on arguing with idiots, which is how to argue with idiots or why to argue with idiots. And it's just a couple short points down into a 10-minute video. But we're doing that so that, if you're sitting there, I don't know, on the toilet or whatever, and you're watching videos or whatever people do with their time, it's there. And you can see it. You can see some of the points, and you can catch a couple of the jokes that we sneak in there and the digs. And I even think I might have included a couple screenshots of some of the stupid arguments I've had with people into that video so that you see more. I don't even want to use the term positive content because it's negative content. It's like two negatives. It's like your shit is negative, but I'm going to out negative you, motherfucker. And by math, it's positive, but it's not going to be so positive that, it's like fairy sprinkles and shit. You're going to actually,
I think it's a good point that there aren't that many new ideas out there. They're just repackaged. And even if you look at a guy like Andrew Tate, you say, well, actually what he's doing here is a pyramid scheme. And oh yeah, he got to start on InfoWars. And I think at least with our audience, if they don't know anything else about the guy, you say he's accused of rape and sex trafficking. And he got to start on InfoWars and with all these influencers, and he's running a pyramid scheme on his website. And oh, he really blew up after he went on Tucker. Yeah. It's like,
and he's grooming young men. So
yeah.
Oh, hey, that's a popular term. Yeah, let's point out the examples of who's really grooming people out there. So, oh yeah, you don't like grooming? Let me here's some grooming for you.
Yeah, they redefined that word.
Shut down your $49.99 a month influencer factory if you really don't like grooming, because that's what you're doing. Well, anything you want to plug? Anything you've got that you want to talk about that you've got, the website, obviously, bullshito.net.
Yeah. I mean, we still have a forums community. They're spread out all over the damn internet. There are forums on bullshito.net. They're pretty active. But it's a sort of a smaller clique of dudes that are just bickering with each other. So, I mean, if you want to wade into that, feel free. It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. I mean, we've got an active subreddit at Bullshito, our Bullshito, and then Twitter, Facebook is garbage. I usually spend my time that I have on the Facebook page just trolling the people that follow us there. There is a group on Facebook that's a little less garbage, and the only reason that it's less garbage is because we have an 8th grade math question that you have to answer correctly to get into the group, which roughly 70% of the people fail it. So, I'm not even kidding. Wow. It's like 7 out of 10 can't pass just basic order of operations question.
Wow.
I love
that.
it.
That really bodes well for the future. We're going to build a lot of rocket ships with that. Well, Phrost, thank you very much. It was wonderful having you on. I'm glad we got to do this. Like I said, I've been a fan for years.
Really
so
great.
It's awesome to get to actually talk to you and hear some of this stuff. Thank you, and appreciate your time today.
Yeah, no, it's been great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thanks you
so
very much. Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can go to DidNothingWrongPod.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at James, the word 4, and the letter M, all one word, and Grizza BJJ, Grza BJJ, as well as DNW Pod. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.